Hello, I'm Norm Kelly from Peoria, Illinois. Been here all my life, and we are Timecast. It's a part of Peoria Life, and we're going to do interviews with local people. And today we have a man that I really don't know very well, but we certainly have a lot in common. And I think, Ken, that I'm going to have you just introduce yourself and tell us really where are you from? You're not from Peoria, are
I'm
you?
not from Peoria. That's an interesting thing because I wrote a couple of books about the
That's
Peoria
right.
area.
Yeah, and I,
I am from Lockport, Illinois, which is near
oh,
Joliet, southwest suburb of Chicago. And that has a historic history of the I&M Canal, the
oh,
Lockport area
yeah.
there. I came here in 2003, and I came here because I fell in love, and my wife is from this area. She has a
Oh,
big family, four brothers. Four brothers and two sisters, and I had one brother. So
uh-huh.
I was moving here.
Oh, yeah. Well,
uh,
so you didn't have a job.
no,
Oh,
I didn't. I've been in radio for 20 years in Chicago, doing news, traffic. I have a journalism background, so I've been doing radio broadcast journalism there, and basically sent an email to the radio group here,
mm-hmm.
going, "Look, I'm coming. I don't know if you know who I am, but I've been in broadcasting 20 years here in Chicago. Worked at almost all the major
Wow.
radio stations by doing traffic." And they immediately said, "We know who you are. This is perfect timing
Oh,
because
man.
Upgrade 74, which is the big I-74 project, was
Mm-hmm.
starting, and they were looking for someone to start up a traffic operation.
Really?
It was just a perfect marriage for all of us in all aspects because I was able to come here and jump right in. We
Mm-hmm.
started this daily traffic operation, and I've been here for 13 years, and we've been doing the traffic for 13 years. And here's what I tell everybody: this year is the 10-year anniversary when Upgrade 74 ended. So it's
Oh,
been 10 years since it ended. And
wow.
part of that project was closing down the Murray Baker Bridge for six
Yeah,
months.
that was really a miserable thing.
So
So,
after that was over, we kind of went in the daily traffic reports. It seamlessly kind of went right into daily traffic
so
reports.
you have the perfect marriage and the perfect job.
Yeah, right. So it
It's
all worked out.
astounding.
It all worked out good.
And you come down here and you just get into my business and just take off all these stories that I was going
Yeah.
to tell. You know,
Well, I didn't mean to do anything.
I know.
I'll be honest. Writing a book and even writing was not necessarily on my bucket list. I was kind of I don't want to say bored with what I was doing because I do
Sure.
enjoy what I'm doing, but having that journalism background, I wasn't going out and I wasn't doing anything
Wow.
investigative or any
Yeah.
research, which I love to do. Go in the library and go through microfilm and old newspapers. And so I was kind of looking for a story just to research.
Hmm.
And Greg Batten, who I work with, he does mornings on 1470 WMBD. He told me, he's from Pekin. He told me there was a steamboat wreck. In fact, I told him I was reading a book about the Eastland, which is the worst boat wreck in
Hmm.
Illinois, on the Chicago River. And he said, well, there was a boat wreck in Pekin. He didn't know how many people were killed or what year.
Hmm.
And I said, really? So I started looking it up, and there were articles and there were stuff
Yeah.
about the Columbia
Hmm.
boat wreck. Just quickly here, 87 people were killed. It was July 5th, 1918. And so I started reading about that, doing more research. But there are a few things in the story which weren't being covered, which were
Hmm.
really part of the missing piece of the
Yeah.
story, which wasn't the wreck itself. It was more what happened afterwards.
The
And
people.
right, and the
Yeah.
and the legal, what happened with the captain and the pilot and who all
Hmm.
survived. And
And who was to blame?
right,
Right.
'cause-
And I went into that story and I was going to read it, and then I realized that I found only one person
mhm,
from Peoria,
mhm.
and instantly I shut it
Yeah,
down. I
right.
had no interest. Is
Yeah.
that true,
Well, but
Ken?
the captain was from Peoria, and he
Hmm.
ran a business, a cigar business, and a fish business up at Chillicothe, and he lived in Peoria. So there were, and the boat was docked in Peoria. I mean, so it
Uh-huh.
was a Peoria business, really, but
Uh-huh.
it is a Pekin story because most people on board were from Pekin.
I don't even do stories about East Peoria.
Yeah,
I don't.
I always tell people Norm doesn't cross the river.
That's true.
Yeah.
And even the gambling that I know,
Yeah.
in East Peoria, a friend of mine, his family, who actually owned 125 slots, and I have that story, and I was just getting ready to
Yeah.
actually have it published, and he called me and said, Norm, would you mind not doing that? And I
Really?
said, well, why? And he said, I promised my sister I wouldn't let it go.
Really?
And it's a shame, really,
Yeah.
because it's a great
Oh, I
story.
bet. I
Can you
bet.
imagine somebody that had 125 right during the time of the
Yeah.
war,
Yeah.
and his family was involved in it?
Yeah.
I laugh because it's all gangsters, and of course I found out
Oh,
that was
yeah.
a big joke. They certainly were just an ordinary family. So how long do you research the Columbia?
I say it took about a year of research and about 2 years total. A year of
Hmm.
research and then a year of writing it. Once I realized I had enough for a book, then I really started, getting into the writing part of it, which I
Where'd
really
you
enjoyed.
go get your degree or whatever you did in journalism? Where was that?
I went to Columbia College and didn't actually finish school because I got a job right in the city and I needed the money, and so I took a full-time job
Wow.
working actually doing horse racing results on a phone line.
Okay, you're a bookie.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, well, no, I wasn't taking bets. The gamblers were calling the line to get the results.
Oh,
They would make their
sure,
bets in the morning and then go home. And since there was no computer or any phones that you
sure.
can go on, they'd have to call a line, a 976 line,
Hmm.
and get their horse racing results. So basically, I would get a call from the announcer's booth. Phil Georgieff, who was a big announcer there at Arlington and the other Chicago tracks, would call and they'd say, "Okay, here's the winners of the fourth race," and they give me all the the money, the
Hmm.
win, place, and show, and then I would go on and record and put that on a phone line that
Wow.
people would call up. And so, and that kind of turned into what became kind of popular, which was the sports lines, which was scores.
Oh,
People would get their
sure.
sports scores. Of course, computers came along, the internet, and then that was
Yeah.
obsolete. But
Where's Columbia?
Columbia College in Chicago, yeah,
In
yeah,
Chicago.
right. It was a liberal arts school,
I
still
never
there, and
never heard of
yeah, they have
that.
a film department, a theater department. They kind of, it's liberal arts, so it's
Yeah.
very much the creative side of things. And they had a radio and TV department. I got in the radio department and and
Wow.
and did.
Have you ever had any bad luck? It seems like you really were
Oh, I say that
shined.
I was really only fired from one job, and they didn't really fire me. I just went from doing the morning show. They were cutting back, so I was doing news in the morning to just doing a weekend shift. But yeah, that's the great thing. I've been able to kind of make my own path,
Oh, you're
uh,
lucky.
the book thing was really just something I decided to do, and I wrote it,
Hmm.
and then the publisher, an independent publisher in Chicago, Amica Press, came along, and they liked what they saw, and they ended up putting the book together for me.
Oh,
So
I think it was a wonderful book. I like I'm a big quote freak. I
yeah,
love to hear what somebody really said.
yeah,
And if as a historian, when I hear people talk and I say, well, why didn't you just look at what he said?
yeah,
For instance, when they start talking about Woodruff here in Peoria, or
mm,
when they talk about Carl, men said
hmm,
what you're talking
yeah,
about.
right,
They told you what they were doing.
right,
There was never really under the table in Peoria.
yeah,
It was talked about on Tuesday nights and the quotes and when Carl come in, he was going to be a big reformer. He
yeah,
said, "Wait a minute, there's a rumor going around that I'm going to be this big reformer.
yeah,
I'm not a reformer."
mm,
And of course, no one believed him. But he then finally, after 16 months in office, he actually closed gambling down.
yeah,
And what kind of reformer is that?
yeah.
He's in office 16 months and it takes him that long, you
Well,
know.
and the great thing about researching that time, the going really from the mid 1800s up to maybe the early 20th century, is
Yes,
that newspaper. That was where you got your information, and
yes.
they covered things, and then, but really covered things, because I came to a point where I had really the only legal thing that was going on with the Columbia would be, because we know that the captain and the pilot didn't make it into a jury trial. The only thing they had was the coroner's inquest.
That's exactly.
And I went to the courthouse there in Tazewell County, and they don't have the records. Even though I knew that at some because they talked about that they had transcribed
Sure
it.
they have.
So I went to the newspapers, in the Peoria papers, because there were several at the time,
Yeah.
and almost verbatim they had each eyewitness every day and what they said. I mean, just long 6, 7, 8 sentence quotes,
Yeah.
and columns and columns.
Isn't that
And
amazing?
so I had it,
I know.
and
I've discovered that, and of course, don't forget now, that these are court reporters were actually
Yeah,
doing
right.
that, and then they were paid to transcribe.
Yeah.
If you knew the things that were said, that the court reporter was never asked to transcribe.
Yeah.
And early on in the coroner's inquest, I relied heavily just on the medical examiner.
Yeah, right.
And I never made any of that up. I simply quoted exactly
Yeah.
what he said.
Yeah, right.
And no one can doubt that. And
Right.
I've always given the early reporters the title of historians, because
Yeah,
they're
right.
the ones who really wrote it. Now, you don't know if
Yeah.
they're telling the truth. I never knew if
Yeah.
they told, but there's a little section in the law called the next best evidence
Right.
rule. And of course, when I couldn't really find it in the coroner's inquest, I was really befuddled, because I really knew that's where the truth was.
Right.
There's a chance that you, as a witness, might really tell the truth 10 days after it happened.
Right.
2 years later, when the trial rolls around, you may have forgotten what you said.
Yeah.
And being an old private eye and a paralegal for 44 years, I realized that was a way that we tripped up many a witness. They
Yeah.
forgot that what they really said in the coroner's inquest was recorded by a court reporter, and then we paid to have it transcribed.
Yeah.
And so naturally we have to give it to the other side. But we won many a case because
Oh, I bet.
later on people got to the witness.
Yeah.
But in your witnesses, they had nothing to hide, these people that were
Absolutely
in the jury.
not. Yeah, and you could tell, you can kind of read their anger and their emotion. And here's the interesting thing: is, even though they had that transcript, and then they gave it to the state's attorney, and
Sure.
he used that simply to convince the jury for the true bill, the indictment.
Right.
And then it was delayed and delayed and delayed, and so it never did get to a jury trial. At some point, it was dropped, but at that point, it was over a year since the coroner's inquest. If they would have gone back to another trial, look how different the testimony would have
Now
been
you're talking.
over
That's
a
what I
year.
mean. And as a private investigator, it's my job, of course, to deliver to my boss the exact initial, the very first thing. And I, as a private detective, would go to a home, and sometimes they wouldn't open the door.
Yeah.
And I would say, "Oh, I just wanted to know what you know about this particular accident.
Yeah.
Get away from me. I don't know a damn thing about that. Don't be asking me."
Yeah.
Well, the court reporter is taking that down.
Yeah, right.
And I'm telling you, Ken, a couple of years later, when he's up there, really going to tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Well, then of course my boss has already introduced that. We have to give everything to the other side, and so we have won considerable cases 2.5 years before they ever went to trial.
Yeah.
And forced the other side many times to settle because of that.
Yeah.
This book. Wreck of the Columbia. When did you write that?
I started work on that. I say 2010 really is when I started doing some of the research, and it came out in 2012. So yeah, I mean, it was a 2-year process, but it's now a forever project,
Yeah.
because even today, I get calls from people who want to do the talk for their group, but
Sure.
even today I'll get emails, and it started right after the book came out, right after it kind of got public in the media, that someone had wrote a book about the wreck. I started getting emails from people who had a connection to it, whether their great aunt or their great grandfather would tell them a little bit about the boat, or one story I would hear mostly is people would go, "Oh yeah, my so and so said that they were supposed to be on the boat that night."
There was one interesting story.
Everybody
in
wants
there.
to get connected into history, right?
But there are a couple in there in the book that are legit though, and
Oh,
I
absolutely.
really like those.
And here's what I do when someone tells me that. I go, I won't tell you, but give me your last name, and they'll say Blackburn.
Okay.
And if I remember, because there are a lot of names in
Sure
there.
there are.
There were 500 people on the boat, so the 87 were killed. So there are a lot more survivors telling stories and a lot of names. If I do recognize the name, I'll tell them. I'll go. I won't say, but read the book.
Read the book, and you won't find yourself in
because
there.
it's better if they find it. You know, I mean, I could say, you know, look at chapter 5, but it's
Right.
better they just read the book and discover it for themselves. And you know, some stories are a little more elaborate than other people's
I
stories.
like the one when they got off at you know where the merry-go-round.
Al
What's that?
Fresco,
Al
yeah.
Fresco. God, I should know
Yeah.
that place. I've written so many things about it, connected with Ellis, Camp Ellis.
You're right.
Because the man who owned it at the time decided that when a GI comes in uniform, I'm going to let him in
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
free.
right.
Well, of course, Camp Ellis wasn't here, and so then thousands,
Yeah.
I mean, began to come in and didn't
came
pay.
here, yeah.
You notice that he then went out of business.
Yeah.
But I like that one case where when they got off at El Frisco, and this had this feeling. You know, I
there
enjoyed
it was a seaman.
That's
Yeah,
right.
he was and he felt it going up river to the Al Fresco, and he refused to get back on the
No,
boat.
I love that. See, to me, Ken, that kind of thing, as a writer, that's how I've sold my own books. I always tried to do what
Yeah.
you just did, and some of the other ones who went down and tried to save them, and
Yeah, right.
it was truly a remark. Have they ever made a movie of this? I
Oh no,
wonder?
I've never seen it. Now there's someone who contacted me from Chicago, who had written a book about the Spoon River, and not written a book. I'm sorry, written a musical
Oh, a
about the Spoon River
musical.
anthologies, or you know that
Oh,
that.
neat.
And he is still working, I believe, on the musical version of the Columbia wreck.
Does he write music as well?
Well, it's kind of like an Our Town type of format with that, where people kind of walk in and say, I'm the old sea captain who was on the boat,"
Yeah.
and he writes a song. You know, I'm just saying. You know, he would write a song about, you know, the boat looked low in the water, and you know, that kind of thing. So, and characters are going to walk in
Really?
and out. Now, I haven't heard from him in about a year, but I know he was still working on that, and his plan was to kind of bring it here on the 100th year anniversary, which would be, of
Wow.
course, in 2018. So I'm still hoping that's the case. So,
And maybe do local people.
and do local, groups here,
Oh,
where he would
yeah.
perform it. You know, and
Well, that might just sell,
well,
especially
yeah, and the story lends itself to that because of what
yeah,
you say. There's
yeah,
little incidents
little.
and people who are on the boat who you know, what, like you were saying. I mean, when well, first of all, I mean, where the boat went down, they were, you know, people who were survived there were lucky, because a lot of people didn't know how to swim
Sure.
back then. In fact, there was a lot of people who were able to swim who would get on shore and run to Pekin and go, "We need swimmers to
I'll
come
be
out and try and
darned.
save those who were still out in the water." But see, across the way from where it went down there in West City, which is what Creve Coeur used to be called, there were fishermen and coal miners living on that shoreline,
Yeah.
on the Tazewell County shoreline. And that's where the boat went down, just across from there. So in the middle of the night, it was midnight when it went down, they could hear the cries and the screams,
Oh,
and the fishermen had boats, so they could quickly get the skiffs, you know, the rowboats out there into the water and save those who were struggling
yeah.
to stay afloat.
Did we have anything like the Coast Guard? Did any official people come and help?
I don't think so, because
Just ordinary folk.
they sent a steamer. They sent the original Julia Bell up, you know, downriver from Peoria, because they wanted the searchlight.
Sure.
But
Oh,
it was so foggy they couldn't even make it close to the wreck. So that was really the only water rescue they could have, is really get a ship really the same size as the Columbia and
yeah.
come downriver, just to give them some
And
light.
they brought the bodies up on near a church
Yeah.
or
Well,
some
well, they
morgue
brought it up
thing?
to Court Street, basically the same spot where most of the people boarded the boat the night before. They brought the first bodies by tugboat because they
Oh,
had several that they had pulled up, and then they had to call off the rescue mission because it was too dark.
yeah.
Plus, they weren't hearing any more,
Oh,
moans coming from the boards below
yeah.
because it was too dark. And then in the morning, at first light, the first bodies that were pulled out were sent by tugboat. People who went to the police station the night before because their loved ones had not returned,
Oh, yeah.
the police sent them down to the river. Said, "Well, the first bodies are coming by tugboat," and so they went down and waited by the river where their loved ones had boarded the night before, and watched as the tugboat came. And some eyewitness described that the bodies were stacked up like cordwood,
Oh,
and then each one were covered in a white sheet. And Mr. Cleary, the Tazewell County coroner at the time, decided that he wouldn't have a scene at the river. He would move the bodies to the morgue, and that's where people could identify their loved ones. They'd walk through
yeah.
a line of bodies, and they just lift up the sheet. And like I described in the book, another shriek or
I
scream from a
know.
loved one would be an indication that their loved one was found.
And the kids,
missing person.
the kids that saw this too.
Yeah,
There-
right.
There's a mentioning of
Yeah,
that.
and several, mostly women and children were killed. It was the time of war, which makes it fascinating. It was an interesting year,
Yeah,
1918.
and don't forget 1918 in August, then with the great flu.
Yeah, the Spanish
And
flu
it was
hit
really,
here.
44 died here, and and it swept the whole damn world.
Oh, yeah. And
that
that's
thing
part of
was
the reason, too, why people started to just forget about the Columbia, because another,
Mm-hmm.
tragedy was supplementing this one.
Yeah.
They say, more people were killed. Pekin was hit pretty hard. That town was hit pretty
Yeah.
hard. So, and that happened literally just months after the Columbia wreck. So, I mean, it's like all of a sudden it was one tragedy after another.
And then, of course, in November, the war ended.
And then the war ended.
That
because
was a major thing in
Here's an
Peoria.
interesting thing. When I did my research, I was trying to find that point when they dropped the case. I kept going through every month newspaper, and I came to a 1-year anniversary, which would have been July 5th, 1919. The 1-year anniversary. I thought, well, the Pekin newspaper is going to have
Sure.
something big in there, like this is the 1-year commemoration, and there was in like the third or fourth page a little box saying,
Isn't
this
that
is the 20. But
strange?
you know what was on the front page, Norm? The Doughboys are coming home.
Oh, yeah.
It was, and why not celebrate and bring them home on July 4th? I mean, how wonderful
What a
is that? How
perfect thing.
patriotic.
We
So-
lost 211 in the city of
Mhm.
Peoria and the county, and the only monument was not in Peoria; it was in Avery.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've remodeled that and rededicated it.
Mm.
I had something to do with that because I wrote about it a lot.
Yeah.
And then when they took it down, I thought, well, they won't bring it back because remember, you and I mentioned the shaft on our email.
right.
That's what they called it. But that was the 1866
Yeah.
Civil
That was the
War.
first Civil War
Mhm.
monument.
And
Yeah.
then when they tore it down, they never put it back
Yeah.
up.
Right.
And so when they did the same thing to Robert Ingersoll,
Mhm.
my photographer and I, we really made a big deal out of that.
Yeah.
And we watched them take it down, put it back up, and rededicate it.
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
Now, is there a monument to the Columbia?
There is a marker, a state historical marker, that's close to the river at Riverfront Park. So it's really marked at the spot where they boarded, rather than marked at the spot where the boat went down, which really is just an old gravel road.
That's all it
Wesley
is.
City goes down by the
Yeah.
tugboat station and down that way. So they really couldn't do anything there. But there is this historical marker at Riverfront Park.
Ken, we're going to change because we have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I want you
Yeah.
now to tell me about the other book you have there. What is the name of it?
It's called Peoria Stories, Tales from the Illinois Heartland. This is a collection of 9 stories. And because I'm not from here, I don't feel like I have a connection like you do or some of the other Peoria writers do. So when I did start writing a few short stories online about Peoria, I tried to find an angle of influential or famous, or really famous people who have a connection to
And that's
Peoria.
when you stumbled across what I'd been writing for
Right,
years. Huh?
right. Well, I started with Teddy Roosevelt and the
Yeah.
Grandview Drive, but why was he here? Why did he say those words? And here we got a couple stories about Lincoln. How can you not? In every city in the state could probably have their Lincoln story.
Sure.
Peoria has their Lincoln story as far as the Peoria speech goes, but there are a couple stories about Lincoln. Charles Lindbergh used to fly the airmail over just months before he became the most famous person in the world.
Bailed out a couple of
Bailed
times.
out a couple of times over this area. William Stephen Hamilton, who was Alexander Hamilton's son, was part of Peoria's early past. So,
And don't forget, I say he named that street after himself, not his dad.
oh, that's possible.
That's what.
But
I
he was
told him.
he was a humble man.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't write anything about himself. He didn't leave any legacy for himself. It was tough for me to find stuff about him, but that was kind of the angle of what I want to do with the story, is tell the story of William Hamilton, both here and outside of the Peoria area, but why he was connected here. My favorite story is the one about Carrie Nation.
Oh yeah.
Who came to Peoria, and really it was because of her visit to Peoria and the brainchild of the Peoria editor, Mr. Brubaker here, who brought her here for a day to edit the newspaper, that she kind of became famous nationally. I mean, after she had made her outrageous stop here, there were others all over the country who were asking her, "Hey, come to my bar." And
Boy, she was a moneymaker. She was divorced twice and changed her name, and actually legally changed her name.
right.
And her role playing here, because we had a little group called the Blue Bonnet or Blue Ribbon Gang.
Yeah.
And I was on a show called the Red Nose Gang.
Yeah.
And that's how I met Harry.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know where it came from. He thought he made it up.
Yeah,
I said,
right.
no, there was a Red Nose Gang here. And they
Yeah,
were
right.
made up of Kellys, Ryan, all my whole family, I suppose. And when they laughed at these ladies. But as you know, and you mentioned it in your book, the only reason, of course, was Wayne B. Wheeler. That's the real driving thing behind it. But it was fun to watch these people. They battled in a kind way. Even when they came into the taverns, a lot of guys would give them $1 or a nickel or something, and then laugh at them. But
Exactly.
the Red Nose Gang, you had to drink 3 shots of whiskey, and then they would observe you for a while. And if you made an idiot out of yourself, they wouldn't let you in the gang.
Well, Carrie had her eye on a painting, which is still here at Richards on Main.
I like that place down there.
Yeah, it's very nice, very historic.
It is.
Underneath the theater there.
The Apollo Theater, which one time was a theater, but it burned to the ground, and the owner died in there.
Yeah.
And his sister still owned that property.
Yeah.
And so she's the one that decided to make the Apollo. It was the only theater built in the city for moving pictures. The rest were all kinds of Nickelodeons and things. And we have always had such wonderful halls and venues in our town, So are these books still available?
Oh, absolutely. They're available on Amazon. You can order them. They do keep them in stock at Barnes & Noble here at the Peoria store. If they don't have them in stock, you can always ask for it. Peoria Riverfront Museum, the store there, carries the books, so they're available online or in
What are you doing
stores.
next? Can you tell people
I am
what
doing
you
a
are?
website. It's called it's a blog site called Unremembered History. So it's unrememberedhistory.com. I also have a Facebook page with it too. And I'm not doing much local. I'm kind of branching out and doing just forgotten history stories.
Oh, great!
Yeah, I just
not
did
so much just Peoria. Then.
No, not really nothing about Peoria. It's in fact, I just did a story about Roosevelt's fourth term, Franklin Roosevelt, how sick he was, even though, and we reelected him, even though he was a very sick man. So they're kind of unremembered, forgotten stories.
Of course, I was living here, and I was a child, and I certainly didn't know that he was crippled, or that's what we called it in those days.
But he was dying when they reelected him in 44.
Now look what's going on today with those.
Exactly.
So what do we have, Tim? We have 9 seconds, right? You want me to shut this thing down? We've been talking to Ken Zurski, and wonderful stuff that you have. I hope you keep writing
Thanks, Norm.
because my days are over.
Oh,
And this is for Timecast, Peoria Life. I hope we can get some interesting people here. Thank you very much for listening.